Well, the movie this week, picked by Josh, AI, Artificial Intelligence, which is what, 25 years old now, or pretty darn
Pretty close to it. Yeah, it came out in 2001. Wow.
24. Yep.
Wow. That is nuts. The reason I picked this movie is there's this podcast, this movie pod called Blank Check, and they'd been doing a series recently on Steven Spielberg, and I'm trying to remember the last movie that they did. It was Schindler's List, but a few years ago they had done a series on like the later stage Steven Spielberg movies. And Kent, in the midst of this series, they did the top 5 ranking, and one of the hosts had this as his favorite Spielberg movie. And I realized I had never seen it before, and I was like, okay, well, I want to check this out. I know that it is atop a lot of people's lists, which is interesting, and we can certainly talk about as we get going. I would say the plot is fairly, I don't know, kind of easy to explain, right? Like there's this robot kid who wants everybody to love him, and because he wants to be so loved, in a way it makes him even creepier because he's a robot and he doesn't know how to love and he doesn't know how to be normal. He's a very strange little character played by Haley Joel Osment. Jude Law is in this movie. I thought Jude Law was going to be a human, just judging by, I don't know, a few photos that I had seen when I was a kid. And then I was like, wait, why the hell did I ever think that? Because he is maybe the most robotic of all the characters in a way.
Gigolo Joe?
Gigolo Joe. And so it's set in, in the 2200s, right? In the 23rd century?
Something like that.
Is that when it's set in? And so, yeah, that's it, right? That's the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Kent, I found this movie incredibly cold. And the backstory of this is pretty interesting, right? Where Kubrick had owned the rights. Stanley Kubrick had owned the rights for many, many years. He was never able to make it because technology never reached a point that he wanted it to or needed it to be at to do so. He eventually gave the rights off to Spielberg, and then once Kubrick passed away in 1999, that kind of kicked everything into high gear for Spielberg. I found this movie very cold, though, and I'm a little surprised that anyone would have it as the best Steven Spielberg movie of all time. I'll be honest.
Okay, you want to hear an even bigger number? The IndieWire. Are you familiar with that?
Yes.
Ranked it as the #1 movie of the 2000s.
Wow, that is wild to me. That is absolutely crazy to me.
Really?
I wouldn't put it up there as the #1 movie of the 2000s, but I could see how you would rank it really pretty high among the Spielberg pictures. And okay, I'm going to kind of go full movie critic here. All right.
Yeah.
So what this really is it took a science fiction story about a robot that got abandoned, right? Meshed it with Pinocchio.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
It went to Kubrick, where it was going to have this cold, distant Kubrickian style, right? And then Spielberg didn't just take what came from Kubrick. He wrote the movie himself. And so it's Pinocchio as sort of filtered through Kubrick to Spielberg. And it's by far the most intellectual of Spielberg's movies, because while it does exactly what Josh said plot-wise, it's raising these questions that are like continue to be resonant questions, about, hey, what makes you human, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And B, what is the relationship between humanity and technology? And the science fiction part of it is only the sort of framework to ask those questions, right?
Yeah.
And then the other thing that it did, watching it this time for me, and this makes a difference in anybody ranking it now as opposed to 25 years ago, is how much stuff they got right.
For sure.
Get right. Starting with the flooding of the cities, right? The all the coastlines have all flooded, and so the major cities are all flooded, and that is precisely what Neil deGrasse Tyson was here a couple weeks ago in Lincoln. I was part of an interview thing with him the week before that, and I was asking him about global warming, and he said if the ice sheets in Greenland and Antarctica, where the ice is on land, melt, the water will rise to the Statue of Liberty's elbow.
And that's pretty much where it was at in the movie, right?
Where it was in the movie.
Yeah.
Okay, how did they know this? But they also get this weird thing that we're all going through now, where there's this almost dread that comes with AI, but it's also pulling you in, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And there's that rub, and that runs through the whole movie. And the one thing that you need to really look at, and I think this movie you benefit if you watch it more than once, is even the sentimental parts, like that ending. If you start thinking about it for a little bit, isn't as sentimental as it appears, and it really gets to the question of, can that robot be a real boy, and why should we attach this emotion to a machine? What's the difference
Correct.
between that robot and the computers that we're all looking at? So all of that comes into that movie. That's why I think it is so highly regarded now. It may not have been so, right when it came out. And I also think that some of that ranking is also from the, this is the kind of movie that critics are going to really like. That may not be as instantly, this is great to the general
Yeah,
audience.
Kent, along those lines, like one of the guys on the pod said that he thought that it actually hurt the movie in the view of the public that it was directed by Spielberg because of our expectations and what we, like they said, if this would have been a David Lynch movie, people would have viewed it much differently because it's like, yeah, David Lynch makes weird crap, so this makes a whole lot of sense.
Exactly. Yep.
This was one where I was glad I went in with very little knowledge. I remember when the movie came out, I remember hearing about it. I remember, Haley Joel Osment and kind of the blank face, but I don't remember anything else. I had no idea it was a Spielberg movie.
Oh, really?
Until the final credit hit.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
I went into this as almost as blind as one could go in, and I'm glad I did for a lot of reasons, because it would have shaded my judgment if I would have gone in even with just the rudimentary knowledge of, hey, this is a Spielberg film and maybe Kubrick was involved. Because now, as you guys are talking this through and I'm going through some of the Wikipedia notes, it totally feels like if Stanley Kubrick and Steven Spielberg had a movie baby, this is what would pop out. Because you have the oddness, the weirdness, the coldness of Kubrick. And then on the Spielberg side, you have a lot of the same Spielberg tropes, things play out a little bit longer. At the beginning of the movie, I was convinced, because I didn't know where the storyline was going. I thought the whole story was going to be the robot, Haley Joel Osment, trying to worm its way into the lives of these parents. And that was going to be the entire film.
Yeah.
Now, and thank God it did change, because those two people would have drove me up the wall. The two parents. I mean,
and the kid too. The other kid sucked.
The kid,
Mhm.
but that's very Spielbergian, where you watch some of his other movies, and the parents usually end up being kind of the dim-witted ones, the ones that don't make the right choices. And just the fact that, this woman who already knows that she has a kid who is, invalid at the point, a real child who is invalid, can fall in love with this robot, or at least be so curious enough to want to activate it, to get it to feel so quickly because of a game of hide and seek that they played. That part drove me crazy. Why the father would bring this thing into the house in the first place, knowing that their kid was still alive, it was crazy in the first place. So you have all of that. Then, of course, it changes in the second act as, the robot now tries to, find its way back home. And that, of course, feels very Spielbergian. So it was an interesting movie. I wouldn't say I liked it a lot. It's certainly not my favorite Spielberg movie, but I'm glad I went into this a little blind because it made the experience better for me, knowing that I didn't know what to expect. I wasn't sure exactly what I was going to expect from, moment to moment.
This was a bummer ass movie, man. This movie made me so sad.
Yeah?
Yeah, the entire, because like the questions it raises about humanity and technology, 100%. But I could not stop thinking about the only thing that this little robot boy wanted, who in all effect was a human boy.
Yeah.
He just wanted to find love and acceptance.
Yep.
And he never found it.
No.
He didn't have a single good moment throughout the entire movie, except maybe toward the end. But even that was a very fleeting experience. And it just makes you existential and sad. And even are we doing spoilers?
Yeah,
for
it's
this?
a 24-year-old movie.
Even when
movie, dude.
Listen, sometimes there's exceptions. But at the end, when the evolution of AI, or that amalgamation, because those weren't aliens, it was like,
I didn't realize that until after the movie.
yeah, they weren't aliens.
Those were other little robots or whatever.
Yeah, it was like the evolution of
Yeah.
robots, what they had turned into when they found
Yeah.
him. Even they were like, "There's nothing we can do for this kid.
Yeah.
Like he's there."
Yeah, he's like excited to get trapped at the bottom of the water because he can just like look at, like, what in the world, man? Like,
Look
you're
at the
right.
statue.
He wanted to be loved so much, but it made him unlovable because he was such a little creep.
See, and I don't even think it was him being a creep. I think it was just people not being accepting.
Well, I mean, he was also holding scissors to his mom's head. Like, he just didn't know what he was doing, though.
But none of that was on him. He was
Robot.
He was doing that because he thought that it would get him loved and accepted because his D-bag of a brother
Yeah, he
told
had a
him
horrible brother.
that. And that kid was intentionally trying to get him deactivated.
And it worked.
Obviously.
Yeah.
Hey, the dude was going through a mental crisis.
What we're all talking about here is part of the point of that is anthropomorphizing the little robot. You're turning him into a person, and he's not. And that's part of the tension underlying in the movie, right?
Yeah.
So who cares whether he's had a great emotional life? He doesn't have emotions. He's a robot. Right? I mean,
Everything about him is artificial.
And man, Kent, how about the performance by Osment is, like, obviously we all remember The Sixth Sense, right? Like, all these years later,
Yeah.
and that has the most famous line and stuff, but he plays that little creepy robot so well. Just the dead eyes.
He said he intentionally didn't blink during all of his scenes. Just to
Crazy.
make it even more creepy.
Standing there all close to everybody.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, he is really good. And this movie sent me down about 5 rabbit holes. So thank you very much, whoever picked this. So then I went and looked, and after this movie, he just didn't do much because he grew up.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, he still acted and stuff, but he's one of those kid actors that, puberty was the end, pretty much.
When he shows up, you're always like, that's Haley Joel Osment as an adult now in this show or in this movie.
His sister was in a lot of Disney Channel shows that I was watching growing up, and I don't think he really fully came back to the acting spotlight because, I mean, Hollywood treated him so bad because he didn't look like what they wanted movie actors to look like.
Yeah.
But I don't think he fully really came back until he was in The Boys, right?
I remembered him before that. There was a show on HBO called Silicon Valley.
Oh,
and I remember him, but I think he was playing a version of himself. So I don't even think he was playing like a brand new
Most of
character.
the stuff that he's done has been television.
Yeah, exactly.
So, so that was the one rabbit hole. And then the other one was the stuff we were talking about, Spielberg movie rankings. I mean, I saw that, and the interesting thing in that I found, some have it as high as number 1. And then there are people that have it. He's done 30 34 or 35 movies, depending on whether you want to count one that didn't ever play in theaters, that was just television only. And some of it have them as low as 17.
Interesting.
Wow.
That was such an interesting part of his career, Kent, because year or two later, Minority Report comes out, which is another movie that I watched in recent days. So
I like Minority Report.
In the early 90s, I mean, he has the greatest year of all time in 93, right? Where he has Jurassic Park and Schindler's List. So he has the box office success, and then he finally wins all of his awards. And after that, I mean, it's really like he can do whatever he wants to do. And so he makes some really fascinating movies. War of the Worlds comes out a few years later in the mid-aughts. And I mean, Kent, in a way, don't you think some people viewed him kind of as like a caricature of himself, where he is in a way going after the Hollywood system for what it's become, but that he helped create because of Jaws, a movie that we did last summer on the Movie Club. And so he has that, but he also has that sentimentality, a part of all of his movies that I know can kind of bug a lot of people as well, where he wants to lean into that. So it was it was a really interesting time in his career after this.
This was also because those were his post 9/11 movies. Okay.
Yeah.
You know, you got to, I guess one of the ways to look at Spielberg is to look at what the era he's doing pictures about, right?
Yeah.
He's done a lot of World War II movies, or World War II-ish movies. He's done Cold War movies. He's done, right? And each one of them has a little different feel to it or tone to it that is what you're getting at. And these are Minority Report and War of the Worlds are post 9/11 movies. And so that's the thing that is kind of underlies that. And for me, I would put Minority Report, not Minority Report, that's not what we're talking about. Pretty high on the list. I mean, I don't know how you can not have Jaws and Close Encounters.
Would you have Jurassic Park up there?
Absolutely.
Schindler's List.
Raiders, Schindler's List.
Yeah.
Saving
Private Ryan.
Saving Private Ryan. This, I think, you know, I don't know how you would not. Probably another of the Indiana Jones movies.
Yeah.
Pick whichever of the other two, not the last one, but the other two. You know, I mean, I'm just going through and seeing.
Well, Dwayne even mentions Catch Me If You Can was this era, and that is one of the more watchable movies he ever made in a series of watchable movies.
And so there you go. I mean, and so I think you got to put it in there, but I don't think you put it in there in the sort of crowd pleasing list.
Definitely not.
I think the lists are different lists.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. Than crowd pleasing. Yeah.
Going back, and this is going to be a very weird transition.
Okay.
Kent mentioned 9/11 earlier.
Wow.
This movie, I believe, is the last film to portray the World Trade Center, the Twin Towers, before the attacks happened.
Interesting. Yeah.
I believe you are 100% correct.
Chance. It's interesting. Because I noticed that when it was all, they showed it frozen.
Even though it comes out after 9/11.
Yeah.
But they'd probably done all the rendering, right, on the special
They
effects.
must have. It's interesting because most of those movies just took it out. Like Spider-Man is the famous one.
Sopranos took it out of the open at one point in time.
But I looked it up because I remember when they did the ice scene, I saw the World Trade Center there. I'm like, what year did this movie come out?
Yeah.
I think part of that was this was still early enough in the CGI era that all the backgrounds weren't CGI.
Never mind. It came out June 29th, 01. So
yeah,
obviously, yeah. So the towers were still standing. Yeah,
Fair enough.
bad. Yeah, I thought it came out after.
I did too for some reason.
Yeah, this is an odd summer movie, Kent. This is not a summer typical Spielberg summer blockbuster by any means.
Let's watch the most depressing movie this summer, guys.
But it was the Spielberg name, and by that time, Spielberg blockbuster summer movie, because he invented it.
Yeah,
right?
He did.
He basically invented it. You know, and the final rabbit hole that I went shooting down was to try to find my review of it.
Yeah.
And of course, it's not in our online like journalstar.com archive, because that doesn't start until 2004. I am home and did not have my access to the previous one, but the things that I found, that I were most this thing got very mixed reviews, and very few people gave it like 4-star. This is great movie. I gave it 4-star. This is great movie when it came out, but I wanted to know what I actually said about it, and I couldn't.
Yeah.
Do that.
Oh, that sucks.
Rip.
Well, there it is, artificial intelligence, AI. It is right now on, well, it was on Paramount.
It
right?
sure
It literally
was.
left
And on
on.
May 1st, it left. So I watched
It
it.
didn't really.
Yeah, Nick DM'd us last night. Kent was like, the movie's not streaming anymore.
Yeah, I rented it, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty wild.
Really? Because I watched it whatever day last weekend.
yeah, I'm pretty sure it must have got taken out.
I think I watched it on Monday or Tuesday night on Paramount Plus. Yeah. So just in the nick of time.